Well, welcome to Third Thursday. I'm delighted my name is Alan Newman. I'm one of the Third Thursday organizers. I'm delighted to introduce tonight's speaker, Maria Reidelbach. I first got to know Maria when she was a speaker a few years ago at a mushroom festival we sponsored at the Rosendale Theater. More recently, I and members of my family had the pleasure of going foraging with Maria, which she will tell you more about in her talk tonight. Maria is a past president of the New York State Mycological Society, a very good cook, and I can vouch for that firsthand, who also teaches cooking for the Cornell Cooperative Extension, an author of cookbooks, an artist, and the organizer of game night at the Marbletown Community Center. Not out in the woods hunting for edibles. She can be found at local farmers markets scoring the best veggies. Maria, over to you.
Thank you, Alan. That was a really nice introduction. So I thought tonight we would talk about foraging. I thought I'd start with learning to forage because there's so much to learn. And I learned by going out foraging with my mother when I was young. She grew up on a Depression era farm in Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania. So the land was not unlike here in the Hudson Valley. And we started out foraging berries and mushrooms and fruit. And she really showed me how much fun it is. She got very excited, and we'd bring our finds home and we would cook them up. And so for me, foraging has always meant warmth and deliciousness and fun. So I am going to have like a little slideshow for a little while, and feel free to ask questions as we go. There's not too many people here, so that'll be easy. And can you see this opening slide?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Good to go. Okay, awesome. So let's see, if I go down here, I should be able to do that. Okay, what is foraging? First of all, foraging I think is really fun. It's a great adventure. It connects you to tradition, because this is the way our ancestors going back eons fed themselves. Agriculture arrived relatively late in human history. And so for eons, we survived by foraging. It's great because what you're finding is you're finding food, it's delicious, and it's free. And it's great physical exercise. Eating foraged food is really good for your body. Foraged food is highly nutritious. It's got all of those phytonutrients and myconutrients that wild food has. When food became domesticated for agriculture, it was bred for sweetness, and the bitterness was bred out of it. And the bitterness is often what the nutrients taste like. And so at the same time that we were learning to make foods more palatable because they were less bitter, they were becoming less nutritious. But again, at the same time, that's when we started using herbs to add back in nutrition. Herbs are super nutritious superfoods. And and it's also, so it's great physical exercise. It's really good for your body to eat foraged foods, and it's really good for your head to be out in the woods. The Japanese call it forest bathing. It's just so good for us to connect, with nature. And I find it really fun to go out there. I realized one day that foraging is kind of like shopping. I think that the consumer culture has really hijacked our foraging, our instincts, and tuned them into shopping, because it's really about looking, scanning, choosing, being able to discriminate. So all of this really taps into our deepest senses and instincts. This picture, this is Alan with a little puffball that he found on our walk in the Osterhoudt And if you can see here in the middle, this is a close-up of that puffball, how beautiful it is and how detailed it is. Oh, how to begin. So it's all very seasonal. You need to pay attention to the seasons because plants grow during certain times of the year, and fungus grows during certain times of the year. We're going to talk about flora and fungi tonight, but not fauna, because that's the third thing that you can forage for, is you can forage for animals too. But that's kind of a whole separate subject that I've written about, but I am a vegetarian, so I don't eat those animals myself. So how to begin? So you pay attention to the seasons. Focus at first on the really easy things. There's a lot of really easy, abundant stuff out there that you can forage that is easy to identify, so you're not going to poison yourself, and abundant, and a lot of it is actually even invasive. So it's good if you eat it. There's so much that just even grows in our backyards. One time I was standing online somewhere, and it was like a weedy area, and I looked around and I counted 7 edibles just, right within the weeds that I was standing in. So there's plenty everywhere. Gear and garb, you're going to want, walking shoes or boots. You're going to want some bug spray, sunblock, baskets, containers, paper bags, a knife, a trowel, clippers, first aid if you're going out into the woods, a whistle, a phone for photos, and to call for help if it becomes necessary. And you really want to forage with friends. This is something where you can kind of like fan out. You can both look at whatever you're finding and give each other feedback. And it's just more fun. And so the photo here is an inadvertent photo that I shot when we were foraging in the Osterhoudt, the new land that Marbletown just added to their park group. And you can see a little kid there, Alan's grandson. And kids love to forage, and it's a really great activity to introduce them to. I know I loved it when I was a kid. I've seen kids who are very picky eaters. When they forage, they will just love to eat what they're finding. Kids are great at spotting mushrooms. Their eyes are close to the ground, and to them it's like a little treasure hunt. And so I can't recommend it more highly as a family activity. So what's out there right now? So berries, there's tons of berries out there right now. There are autumn berries, which I actually stopped and I got an autumn berry branch. Let's see, do I unshare for a second? Yes, I do. So I can't see myself here. Here we go. So here's an autumn berry branch, and the reason it's called autumn olive. And the reason it's called autumn olive is because you can see that these branches have a silvery underside like olive leaves. And then here are these delicious berries that are really yummy, and they're small, but they're very like abundant, and they're tart, and they've got a ton of vitamin C. They've got a lot of anthocyanins, and but they're also sweet, and you can add them to all kinds of baked goods. So those are out there right now. Autumn olives are invasive, so the more you eat, the better. And they're freezable, and they make a really nice alternative to cranberry sauce for your Thanksgiving dinner. Something else that's out there right now is sumac. Where I grew up in Pennsylvania, it was pronounced shumac. So you guys have seen these. These are growing all over the place. And these are there's a very kind of odd little berry thing going on here. It's fuzzy, and it's kind of furry. And You may be familiar with this from the spice mix called za'atar. It's a mixture of sumac, thyme, and sesame seeds. And so you can make your own za'atar. If you harvest your own sumac, you want to get it while it's been dry for a while because a rain will wash the flavor away. So this is a good time to gather it. You want to make sure that the inside is not moldy, because there's like a moldiness that'll take over inside. So just check the inside, and then you just take these beautiful little furry things off and crush them up. And you can also mix them with water, soak them in water, like kind of infuse them, and it makes a nice lemonade. It's a beautiful pink color. So I'm going to go back to the screen here. Also fruiting right now are elderberries. We're right at the end of the elderberry season, and rose hips, which are on the upper right corner here. Rose hips are kind of cool. They are full of vitamin C, but they aren't juicy. They are not a juicy fruit, but you can infuse them. We made a rose hip syrup recently that we made cocktails out of with some rye whiskey, and so it's called Rose and Rye, and it had some lime and it had the rose hip syrup. It was pretty delicious. Also growing out there right now are wild grapes. Tea berries are tiny little berries that grow close to the ground. Now, because this is a short talk, I'm not going to get too much into really showing you how to identify these things. At the end, I have a little bookshelf for you to check out that will help you identify these, so that you can be sure that they are the edible object that you're looking for. Nuts and yes.
I have read that most red berries are poisonous to humans, so you have to be careful.
I don't think that most red berries are poisonous, but you do have to be careful.
Okay.
A lot of red berries are delicious. You know, one of the things, as animals, the appearance and the fragrance and the flavor of substances are how we know what nutrition that they have. And there are a lot of red berries that are just, you know, super good for you and super delicious. And so I think that's one of the things that attracts us and cues us. There are red berries like honeysuckle comes to mind that are toxic. Pokeberry is a dark purple berry you don't want to eat. So you don't want to eat things that you don't really know what they are. But there are plenty of red berries that that are perfectly safe and edible. Autumn berries being one of them, and you will see these bushes that are just, you know, blanketing the roadsides right now, and they're pretty unmistakable. But do look them up to make sure, and before you eat them. So nuts and seeds are also happening right now. There are a lot of local nuts that are delicious. I don't think there are any toxic local nuts. Nuts are, acorns have a lot of tannins, and you have to really highly process them before you eat them. But black walnuts are really delicious. They will stain your fingers black. These are black walnuts in the upper right corner here. But they are a really rich walnutty flavor. I think of them as almost slightly gamey tasting, and they have a wildness to the flavor. And I like mixing them with regular walnuts when I'm making something with walnuts, because they just like amp up that walnut flavor. Hickory nuts are much milder. They're similar to a walnut. These are hickory nuts here in the middle. Chestnuts. There is a chestnut tree. Many chestnuts have died from the chestnut blight that swept through 100 years ago, but there are still a few grown chestnuts around. There's one on Leggett Road in Marbletown that I gathered chestnuts from last year. These are chestnuts here on the bottom left. Amaranth seed, this is amaranth on the right. There's a bunch of amaranth, types of amaranth. Some is red, some is green, and their seeds are very tiny. So you need lots of them. And acorns, of course, I didn't depict those, but the natives in these parts picked acorns and they slaked them in water for a long time to get all the tannins out, and then they dried them and powdered them into a flour, a very nutritious flour. But that's a lot of work, I gotta say. I have never eaten acorns for that reason, but they are edible.
Maria, a lot of people grow amaranth as an ornamental flower. Could you say a little bit more? I mean, I do too.
Yes, okay, so amaranth leaves are delicious. And you can eat those when they're small in a salad, or as they get bigger, you can cook them. And then the seed, you can pop. It's very tiny. And, you know, I tried putting the seed in a seed cracker that I like to make, and it was like tiny little metal BBs. They did not get crunchy when they were baked. So you don't want to do that, but you can pop them. And that's what they do in South America with it. And they make this kind of popped rice treat where they mix it with like a sugar syrup. And it's like this crunchy, sweet treat. But they are very tiny, and you can just take those seed heads and like shake them out in a bag and eat the amaranth seed. But again, the amaranth has a lot of iron in it. And so both the greens and the seeds are really, really good for you. And it's so easy to find. It grows wild. It's also an ornamental that people grow in their gardens. I think of it as a really cool plant because you can eat different parts of it. Any other questions? Do we have any other foragers here, by the way? I should have asked at the beginning. Oh, good. Okay. Newbies. Yay. Okay. Mushrooms that are out there right now. So this autumn is the best season for mushrooms. There are mushrooms that grow like, you know, pretty much almost all year long, but autumn is really peak season. We are in a dry autumn, so there aren't as many out there as there might be, but they are out there. Some of these photos we took on our walk at the Osterhoudt. So one thing that you'll find this time of year and even during the summer are chicken mushrooms. That's this really bright orange mushroom. Polyporus sulphureus is the botanical name. I believe that Polyporus has been supplanted by a new genus name now that they're rearranging all the names, but most of the books still call it Polyporus. And these are very easy to identify. They grow on dead wood. And when they are fresh and young and moist, they're delicious. Right down below here is puffball. This is different than the one in the opening slide. This is a craniformis, or a brain puffball. This is my favorite. This we found in the Osterhoudt, but we cut it in half and it was already starting to sporulate. It was beginning to like become its puffy self. They're called puffballs because what happens is that the solid white inside, which is what you eat when it's fresh, just kind of turns into this slimy black mass, and then it dries out, and there's like a pore that opens in the center, and like it puffs out their pores all over the place. It's quite a show. Here is a white oyster mushroom that was also found on the Osterhoudt property. Right now, we find the golden oyster mushrooms much more frequently in the last 5 years in our forests. They are everywhere. They are delicious. You can find them in abundance. They all escaped from a mushroom farm near Reidelbach. Citizen mushroom hunters have done DNA studies, and also because people use things like iNaturalist and log in their finds, it was actually, we were able to track the trail of golden oyster mushrooms over the last 5 years as they spread from this, where they escaped from this mushroom farm. Over here on the left is, oops, let's go back one, is a little arrangement of mushrooms that we found on the Osterhoudt the first day we went, just to show that even during a dry time, you can find lots of different mushrooms. Up here on the top right is a mushroom called shrimp of the woods, Entoloma abortivum. And this is like a weirdo mushroom. I'm going to unshare for a second. This is like a very weird little mushroom. You can kind of see it's got kind of a funny shape. It's very crenulated. I'm going to cut it in half so you can see the inside. The inside is pretty much white, but it's got a little differentiation. This is a mushroom that is a hypomicized mushroom. It's two mushrooms growing together. And you can see here in this picture, there's like a mushroom here on the right. And there's another set in picture here. These two mushrooms grow together and they form this mushroom that I just showed you. So it's one of those oddball things, a little bit of nerding out here on the mushrooms. And then here is a mushroom that this is a hen of the woods mushroom on the bottom right that I spotted at the High Falls Food Co-op that my friend David Work picked. It's a wild mushroom. They're selling for $21 a pound. Just saying, you can find these in the woods right now, nice and fresh. And these are just like a very small selection of what's out there. Any question? Now, mushrooms, of course, people, there are 4 deadly mushrooms that grow in our woods. And so mushrooms you need to be extra careful with because, they can be deadly. But luckily, the deadly mushrooms in this area are all of a similar type. So if you avoid that type of mushroom, you're not going to kill yourself. That's the good news. And the other good news is that there are about a dozen really easy to identify common local mushrooms that you can learn to forage safely. And they grow out there in abundance. And 3 of them are here. 4 of them are here. The chicken mushroom here, the Polyporus sulphurus, the oyster mushroom, Ostriata, the puffball, which is, this one is Craniformis, and Umphallatus is the puffball, and the hen of the woods down here, which is Grifola frondosa. And these are all super easy to identify. And I'm going to show you a book that will teach you how to do that safely. Greens and herbs are also out there. And one of my favorite things to forage is watercress. So on the right, this is a watercress patch that is right off Main Street in High Falls. And you can, all of this green stuff is watercress. There's another patch that's just as big off Main Street in Rosendale. You can find watercress growing in clean water in many places. And it is delicious. It is identical to what to cultivated watercress because it is an escapee. It was brought from England and it does grow in water and it grows all the way into December. The patron saint of watercress is Saint Barbara, and her day is December 3rd. And she's the patron saint of watercress because you can find watercress growing in December. As soon as it gets warm enough, it'll jump up out of the water and start growing again. So, and it is delicious and really good for you. On the bottom left here, there is sheep sorrel, which is growing right now. It's a very small plant, but sorrel is a very tart plant. And there are garden varieties of sorrel. This is a wild variety. This image in the middle is wood sorrel, and you have all seen this. It grows all over the place in the garden. It looks kind of like a clover or a shamrock. And if you taste it, it's very tart. And this is also good in salads. Let's see, Anise hyssop. I've got some anise hyssop right here. Here is anise hyssop. It's got a beautiful purple flower. It's got a leaf that looks like this. And it is not anise, it is not hyssop, but it has a flavor that combines both. And you can grow that in your garden, or you can find it growing wild and make a tea out of it, or infuse it in water for a nice drink. Mint grows wild all over the place. There's a bunch of different kinds of mint to find, and it always has a square stem. That's the way you can tell it's a mint. Any other wild greens anybody has any questions about or suggestions about? Okie doke. And the last slide is about flowers. So Jerusalem artichoke is out there right now. You can see it. It's related to sunflowers. And the petals of the Jerusalem artichoke taste like sunflower seeds. And of course, if you dig them up, you will find the tubers at the bottom that are the vegetable Jerusalem artichoke. They are really delicious. They make some people fart like crazy, so you got to be careful. You want to cook them well. Some people they just don't agree with because of that. They have a substance called inulin, and it causes that whole farting thing. So this dayflower also grows on the Osterhoudt, this little blue flower that is nice in salads. And also don't forget foraging wildflowers. You can, I found these flowers on the Osterhoudt. There's some wild grasses. There's these little pink things are called smartweed, and loosestrife, of course, is an invasive wildflower. This is a forager's bookshelf. Now, one thing that I haven't talked about that you need to be careful about is that you want to be careful about not over foraging plants that are rare or endangered. Often these are things where you gather the whole plant, like ramps are a favorite to forage in the spring. They're a wild onion, and they propagate slowly, so that you really want to have a big patch of ramps before you forage any of those, and you don't want to take too many each year. My favorite books about foraging, my very favorite is by Dina Falcone. She is a Hudson Valley person. It's called Foraging and Feasting. And it is, let's see, I think I'm gonna unshare here. You can capture this screen. I'll come back to it later if you want to. This is Foraging and Feasting. These two women, Dina Falcone and Wendy Hollander, they kickstarted this book, and it was the most successful cookbook on Kickstarter in its day. They raised over $100,000 to print this book and distribute it, and it is fabulous. It is both a guidebook to wild plants and a cookbook, and it's not cheap. It's, I think, goes for $40 or something, but it is so worth it because it's a cookbook and a guidebook in one. And beautiful, beautiful drawings by Wendy Hollander, who is a master botanical drawer. And these identify everything that I've talked about today. This book has all of those in it. It has wonderful tables telling you when things come into season, how to use them. It's just a font of information. And yes, so this is a great book. Another really good beginning foraging book is called The Joy of Foraging by Gary Linkoff. And it just walks you through, all different types of fruit and vegetables and herbs that you can forage. Yule Gibbons, Yule Gibbons was the stalking the wild asparagus guy. People who are older are going to remember him. He's kind of became a joke or a cliche in a way, but I went back and I read Yule Gibbons's books, and they are really fantastic books. Stalking the Wild Asparagus, Stalking the Blue-Eyed Scallops, which I did this past summer for the very first time, and yes, they do have blue eyes, and Stalking the Healthful Herbs. And all three books are just terrific. You can buy them used, and they make a nice little set. He is fabulous. As far as mushrooms go, a great beginning mushroom hunting book is The Mushroom Hunter by Gary Linkoff. This starts you out mushroom hunting in your yard, the mushrooms that you can find in your backyard. Then it goes to meadows, then it goes to the woods. So it really kind of takes you on a progression, and it shows you the mushrooms that are really safe for beginners to gather and eat. And it does also have recipes. Gary Linkoff was the author of the Audubon Guide to North American Mushrooms. Is that right side up? Yes, it is. This book is now out of print, sadly. There is a new edition that I have heard is not very good. They redesigned the book, and they did a whole number on it, and apparently it just isn't quite as good. So find this used, or they probably still have it in bookstores. So it's got all of the mushroom photographs up front, and mine is like falling apart because I use it so much, and then all the descriptions in the back. But this is for when you get a little more into it. And also my other go-to mushroom identification book is Mushrooms and Other Fungi of North America by Roger Phillips. This also you'll need to buy on the used book market. And this has like lots of photographs and descriptions. So this is really helpful if you're dealing with mushrooms and you don't know what you have. But this is for if you are like a middle range mushroom hunter. You can stay a beginning mushroom hunter and have a lot of fun finding and eating mushrooms all season long. So, if that's your level, that is just, that's very doable, I think, for people. And then the last book, just for fun, Wild Drinks and Cocktails. This talks about how you can make juices and tinctures and extracts and syrups and shrubs out of wild ingredients, all kinds of herbs and leaves and flowers. I really had fun gathering and making tinctures that we used to make bitters, and then we used the bitters to make different kinds of cocktails. And there are so many great flavors. I made my own root beer out of sweet birch and sassafras and maple syrup. And, it was a totally tree root beer with the maple syrup provided the sweetening, and, you just add seltzer, and, it's not a brewed root beer. That's what we used to have when I was growing up. We actually brewed our own root beer with yeast, but, it's fizzy and it tastes delicious. So let's see, I'm going to go back to that bookshelf screen. In case anybody wants to capture that. Oh, and on the right is, I couldn't resist sharing this kind of time-lapse photograph. There is a type of mushroom called an amanita. And if you find an amanita egg, which is what this first one is, you can grow it in your house. And so this is the egg, and this is the second day, and this is the third day, and this is the fourth day, where it opens up and unfurls itself completely. So that is the slideshow. I thought I'd leave it open for questions. And I have my share screen turned off now, is that right?
Oh, no, we'll hold it on, but I'm gonna take the privilege of asking the first question.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, when I started out collecting mushrooms, even though I was reasonably confident I knew what I was getting, and you're right, golden oysters are everywhere and really common. And I'm even along rail trails where hundreds of people go by. I'm always surprised how many people miss big patches of golden oysters. But even then, I was nervous. I was very nervous.
Mm-hmm. That's
Let's have-
that's a good thing, you know. I mean, just we have to think about the fact that we are animals, you know, and it's good to have trepidation about something that you haven't eaten before. You know, that's what kept us from being poisoned for, you know, so many years. That's why we survived. That's why we're here today, because our ancestors did not poison themselves. So it's good to have trepidation, and at the same time, you know, it's good to be adventurous. And there are, you know, there are lots of sayings among mushroom hunters that, like, there are old mushroom hunters and there are bold mushroom hunters, but there are no old, bold mushroom hunters. That's one of them. And another one is you can eat any mushroom once. Um, so, you know, yes, you need to be really careful. There is a local mushroom hunting club called the Mid-Hudson Mycological Association, and there's nothing like having someone with you who can look at that mushroom and say, yes, that is a golden oyster mushroom and you can eat that.
Can I add something?
Sure.
I'm actually at a climate change conference here at the Hutton Brickyards,
Oh,
but I
hi.
went on your thing at the same
I was at the
time.
Hutton Brickyards earlier this afternoon.
But I wanted to add something that Yule Gibbons said
Yes.
about poisonous, but I don't know anything about mushrooms. He said the way you keep from getting poisoned is that you know the mushrooms that you're looking for and you know what they look like and you leave everything else alone.
Oh, that's an interesting approach. Yeah, well, I think
That's a quote from
that would really work. It's not really my technique, but yeah, there are rules that you can follow if you are a lone mushroom hunter and you don't have, you know, Gary Linkoff at your elbow to tell you, which I was lucky enough to have when I was hunting with the New York Mycological Society. And one of them is that, you know, you find your mushroom, you identify it with using 3 different sources. You rule out all toxic lookalikes, and then you save some back, you cook some up, and you take, you know, you just take a couple of bites the first time, and you sleep on it, and you wake up the next day, and when you're fine, then you can try eating a serving of the mushroom, because not only could it be toxic, but it might not agree with your, you know, it just might not agree with you. You could be, you know, allergic, or it might, you know, chicken mushrooms are very common and they're non-toxic, but some people, it just upsets their stomach. So, you know, those are kind of the rules that I go by when I find a new mushroom. But I have to say that you really can't do better than having somebody look at the mushroom and tell you and positively identify it for you, because that can give you the most confidence. And then when you do that, you go back to your source material and you read the description again, and that helps you see how those descriptions match up with mushrooms, and you can kind of teach yourself that way as well.
Maria, I have 2 questions for you. What do you think about spore patterns as a way to help identify mushrooms, and using the internet to identify?
Oh, thank you for asking that. Don't trust the internet. You know, there are a bunch of pop-up mushroom sites that have bad information. So make sure you're sourcing your information from someplace that's really authoritative, like a university or a bona fide mushroom hunting group. Amateur mushroom hunters that belong to groups are pretty assiduous. If you go on Facebook to one of two like mushroom club sites though, and you post pictures, a lot of people are chiming in with identifications that are not necessarily correct identifications. So be really, really careful. There are some really wonderful sites like iNaturalist that are really great for logging your finds. You can post, you can post your find there, and it helps to make a map and helps to make a sort of a inventory or a census of who's finding what mushrooms where. Of course, if you find something like morels, which are pretty hard to find around here, you might not want to share your spot exactly. And talking about sharing spots for mushrooms, I know some people are very, very protective of their spots. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. The one thing that you have to watch out for are commercial pickers. And commercial pickers will just come in and they'll take it all. So, especially with something very valuable and hard to find like morel mushrooms in the spring, you might want to just, be a little bit circumspect with your spots and not tell everybody where you're finding them, because, soon enough, somebody might come in and just take all your mushrooms. One thing about mushrooms to know is that they are like apples on the tree. The actual critter is living underground. It's the mycelium that lives underground or in the wood or whatever the mushroom's growing on. So picking the mushroom is not going to hurt. In the vast majority of cases, it is not going to hurt the actual critter, the mushroom critter. So you can pick them all if you want. There's plenty of spore out there flying around.
And spore patterns?
Oh, spore prints, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So spore prints are really helpful for identifying mushrooms that you don't know what they are. So the way that you do that with a cap and stem mushroom, which is one of those mushrooms that looks like this, like a supermarket mushroom, is you take the stem off, you put the cap onto a piece of paper. You don't know necessarily whether the spore print's going to be light or dark. So I sometimes put mine on aluminum foil so I can see the spore, whether it is light or dark. And it's the color of the spore that is going to help you identify the mushroom. So that is one of the distinctive features of a mushroom that help you identify it.
How long does it take for the spore to move onto the paper or the thing?
It can be really quick. And, sometimes you find mushrooms that are growing on top of each other and you can actually see that they've left spore prints on top of each other. So you may not even have to take it home to make a spore print. But, usually overnight, you want to put it on a piece of paper and then maybe cover it with a drinking glass or something so that it is kept moist. And then it'll drop its spore almost always, unless it's too dried out and old. It'll drop its spore and you can take a look and see what color it is. Now, if you want to really get in the weeds of identification, you're going to want to look at that spore under a very good microscope, because spore is tiny. But, I don't go to those lengths personally. I stick to mushrooms that I can identify with what they call the macro characteristics, what I can see with my eyes and with a magnifying glass. But if you really want to get into it, there's even DNA testing you can do yourself now.
So everybody's concerned about poison mushrooms, but if you're collecting greens or berries, there's some, to what extent do you have the same concerns? Are there greens out there that you can get confused about and pick accidentally and get ill, or are those pretty clear?
Well, poison ivy is a really good example of a green that you don't want to eat. And, you know, when I was a kid, I was gathering autumn leaves and they turned such a beautiful shade of red, poison ivy. I only did that once. But in general, plants are a little easier to identify, and you know, there aren't that many that will really kill you. But you know, you always want to use a guide when you're gathering wild things, when you're first learning them, whether they're a plant or a fungus.
And I have to say, I also heard that rule that red berries to avoid red berries, and it's interesting
You know,
that doesn't hold up.
I've been hearing that lately, and I don't know where that's coming from because there are like plenty of red berries that are so delicious. There's wine berries and raspberries and tea berries, and of course autumn berries. You know, there's so many good red berries that are delicious. You know, you just can't pick them indiscriminately, you know, that's all. As you would, you know, you wouldn't eat anything indiscriminately. And, you know, again, that kicks in what you had mentioned earlier, Alan, about it being hard to take the first bite of something that you haven't identified before. The golden oyster mushrooms, for example, you know, we have that trepidation for a reason, but you can reason with that trepidation and, you know, use your brain to, you know, just take this step by step and be comfortable with it and, you know, take that first bite. And it's delicious enough that you're going to want to take the second bite, right? But you wait till the next day. And I have done this a number of times. I have never gotten sick from mushrooms that I have gathered or that anybody I trusted has gathered. And I've been doing this, you know, regularly for the last 25 years. And then when I was a kid, so, you know, and I don't consider myself, you know, super talented in this regard. But, you know, I do love to go out there and gather them. And, you know, some mushrooms are just so delicious, you know, and, you know, there's a mushroom out there that's related to button mushrooms, the kind you buy in the supermarket. It's called the horse mushroom or the prince mushroom, two different mushrooms. And you break them open and they smell like marzipan. They smell like almonds, and then you cook them and they smell like toasted almonds and mushrooms mixed together. I mean, there's nothing like it. It's so delicious. It's just so thrilling to be able to find something like that growing wild and to be able to eat it.
And I want to add one more mushroom to your list. You didn't mention chanterelles, which are around here and are quite delicious.
So delicious. Yes, several different kinds. There's black chanterelles that are called black trumpets. There are trumpet-shaped chanterelles called tubiformis. And of course, there are two kinds of golden chanterelles that are just apricot-y and delicious and so fragrant and so delicious, cooked so many different ways. Pasta, risotto, grilled. And mushrooms are very nutritious also. There hasn't been a lot of nutritional testing done on them. So it's just not as well known how you know about their nutrition, but they are very nutritious, lots of minerals and vitamins.
Well, this is a kind of a silly question, but do any of the poisonous mushrooms taste really good? Could you be fooled by their taste, or do they have an off taste?
I don't know. You know, I have never eaten a poison mushroom actually, so I don't actually know.
I think feels like with berries and greens, the poisonous ones would be very bitter or not taste good immediately, and you know, you would be forewarned. I don't know, but I guess that's who knows how good they could possibly taste.
You know, it's a very good question actually, and you know, the mushroom hunters that I know just don't go there.
Well,
They they just don't eat them. Any other questions about different kinds of habitat or
Well, I have a question. Are most of the really tasty edible mushrooms, do they grow on trees? Do they grow on the ground? Is there any, or
well, so that's one of the distinctive things about mushrooms that'll help you identify it, whether it's growing on the ground, on a live tree, on a dead tree, undisturbed. Some of them like to grow on mulch piles. Some of them like to grow on a disturbed area where there's recently been digging. So they do grow all over the place. There are so many different kinds of mushrooms out there. There's a gajillion different kinds, and they just grow all over the place. They are ubiquitous.
and I guess learning who likes disturbed ground, who likes dead trees, who likes live trees helps you to key in on where they are.
Yes. And I like that you used the term who, because once you start learning these different plants and mushrooms, you start becoming friends with nature because you know their names, and there's something that's like a little magical about knowing the name of something. It's like an introduction to it. And I find that it really makes me feel much more at home with nature when I know these plants and when I know these fungi, that you come and you're like, oh my gosh, look who's here. How did you get here? And look how many of you there are. It's a bit of anthropomorphism, but it makes my heart feel good. And to me, that's part of the health giving part of foraging, I think, that just raises your spirits.
And you didn't mention anything about the connection between rain and mushrooms.
Well, yeah. So mushrooms really like, rain, not too much, they won't grow in a wet area mostly. There's only one mushroom known that grows underwater. But they do like rain, especially the mycorrhizal fungi that grow on the ground and have relationships with trees. But the mushrooms that grow on wood are much more likely to be growing when it's dry out. So right now, since we're in a dry period, you are still going to find chicken mushrooms. You're going to find lion's mane mushrooms. You're going to find oyster mushrooms and hen of the wood mushrooms. They're still going to be growing out there, even though it's been pretty dry. What you're not going to find is porcini, which are so delicious. And sometimes we can find those in abundance. One of the most delicious mushrooms known to man. Porcini means a little pig. These are boletes. And so I have not found very many of those yet this year. We can only hope for that we start getting a little bit of rain because the season's not over yet. So we could still look forward to some of those if it starts raining soon.
And are there rules on where you can forage? I mean, can you forage on all state and national lands? Or are there
No, you need to check the regulations about that. Many of them allow you to forage for mushrooms because you aren't, as I said, mushrooms are like the fruit from the tree. You're not gonna harvest, you're not gonna hurt anything by collecting them. But other plants are not the same way. If you are collecting ramps or sassafras roots, that kind of thing, you're actually taking the whole plant, and so you're going to want to check and make sure that you're allowed to do what you're doing where you're doing it. And also, if you've got a good guide, it will also tell you which plants are vulnerable and that you would not want to take them at all or take very many of them because they're endangered. One thing about the weather is that our part of the country is supposed to be getting much more rainy and wet in the coming years because of climate change. And so that means it's going to be better for mushrooms. So we at least have that to be part of our future.
I just wanted to mention that there is a group called United Plant Savers. I don't know if anybody's familiar with them, but they have a list of endangered plants that you should not forage in the wild.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's mostly related to medicinal plants, but there is a lot of overlap with the food plants as well.
Could you put that in the chat, please?
Of course.
That's great. I would like to have that. And I'm going to put the book list also in the chat.
It's there.
Great. Oh, mushrooms in the sun make vitamin D. Yes, I love that. You can take supermarket mushrooms and put them in the sun for an hour, and they will have many times the vitamin D that they had previously. They say that mushrooms are just as closely related to animals as they are to plants. And, you know, our skin produces vitamin D, and mushroom skin also produces vitamin D.
Well, if there are no more questions, I want to thank Maria for a really entertaining and interesting and unique view of wild edibles and foraging. I'm hoping to bring Maria back in the spring so we could talk about some of the early stuff. You've mostly concentrated on fall items, and maybe we'll do another forage through the Osterhoudt or maybe one of the other parks.
Terrific. That'd be really fun. This was great fun.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thanks
Thank
so much,
you.
Maria. This is great.